Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunwerks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
We're back on with another episode of Long Range Pursuit Podcast. This is our little mini-series we're calling Product Insights. And so, two product managers here. Jim, this is your second time on.
Yeah.
I think. Still relatively new to the team. We were just saying, is it 4 months in now?
Yeah, 4 months
Probably feels like a little longer than that. What's happened in those 4 months?
Man, we're fast.
It's a fast pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just joking. There's a project that you guys will probably see coming out here before too long that probably in most buildings in this world would probably be a 2-year project, and we're what?
We're going fast.
three of 4 months in on this one or something like this. Yeah. It's moving along pretty good though.
It's exciting. It's exciting to have the opportunity and the capabilities to go out on the production floor or wherever and make changes real time. And
so it's
awesome.
Good day to be alive. So I wanted to talk, I'm calling this one Need for Speed, and we're probably going to kick a few hornets' nests here. And, but you know, there's this tendency for hunters to want the biggest, fastest, meanest, highest performance, high octane cartridge they can. And
Guilty.
So the funny thing is that I'm the one talking here, right? I think a lot of us are guilty of this, and but I think there's a different approach, and I think as the sport of long range has evolved and some of the technologies and our understanding of ballistics, case design, modern scopes and long-range turrets and all these things have kind of come about, I think there's some advantage to at least trying to curb some of those tendencies just a little bit, right? Now, there's always an application for everything, right? There's different nuanced uses and pursuits and whatever else, and sometimes it's I just want the biggest, fastest race car there is. And sometimes that's a good enough reason. But I wanted to kind of dig into this a little bit. And I think if you look back, I don't know what you've probably even got a little bit more history in some of this. I'm relatively new to the serious shooting and range game. But 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was just build this really fast Magnum. You got the Rem mags and the Win mags that came about, and the Rums that came about, and they were all the rage. And it was just put a whole bunch of powder behind a bullet and push it really, really fast and hold on fur. And that was kind of long range at the time, right?
And long range as a distance has been redefined.
Very subjective. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't even called, maybe not even called that back then.
Well, I mean, I just think the capability.
You're just trying to extend your range and shoot a little farther.
Right.
And so, that was the traditional approach was, okay, we're just going to make this big, huge, Weatherby Magnum, whatever. We're going to put a lot of powder behind it and push that bullet really, really fast. And that's going to reduce the amount of drop, where I can hold top of his back at 400 yards and probably make a kill or something like that. I think that's kind of to oversimplify maybe the traditional approach to extending our effective range in hunting. Things have changed quite a bit over the last 20, 30 years though.
Yeah. And sad to say, that I'm the old dog and these are new tricks. I've seen 30 years worth.
You've seen all of it. And you actually bring a really unique perspective that I have a zero background in, and really probably relatively unique in our entire building. We've got 100 people, working here at Gunwerks now, but maybe just fill us in a little bit of your background, because I think that provides some perspective, at least from the shooting sports things.
Yeah, I guess depending on how far I go back, but early days, I was really tinkering and messing around with small calibers. So absolute speed, we're 4,000 feet per second.
And when we say small caliber, it's like 6 millimeters.
Yeah.
Too, is you're talking like
17s and 20s and all kinds of wildcats. I mean, yeah. So that was where I started. Actually my first rifle was a 1999, Remington Classic. Every year they had a classic, and it was in 17 Remington.
Nice.
Right. And that was it wasn't exactly my first, but one of my earliest rifles. And so 9 twist, 17 cal, 25 green bullet, doing 4,000 feet per second, and hopefully holding together. And we'll talk about. I mean, it was
hopefully.
Well, I mean, the barrel was kind of rough, and 9 twist was super fast for that.
Right.
Back in the day, and there were challenges. And then I migrated there in the quest of accuracy into bench rest.
Yeah.
And I started shooting bench rest competitively in that early 2000s, and did quite a bit of shooting, mostly for score. And so I was shooting back then, 30 caliber BR. I started with a 6 PPC. Back then that was everything. And then right on that cutting edge, early days of the slow twist, 30 cal, 17 and 18-inch twist.
Really?
Barrels.
Flat base bullets.
Flat base, light,
Relatively
1-inch
light
jackets, actually swaging my own bullets, and shooting really precision cartridges at short range. Short range bench rest, 1, 2, and 300 yards.
Okay, is that so? I'm not as familiar with the bench rest, and then you have some that's like 1,000-yard bench rest.
Yeah. Short range bench rest is 1, 2, and 300 yards.
Okay,
right. 600 is kind of that other space, and then 1,000, and so my bench rest stuff was all done short range. Yeah. So I made my own bullets, obviously, making my own cases, wildcatting. All the things that go along there. Making the bullets was quite a learning, so swaging bullets, jackets, lead cores, squirting. So that's kind of my background. And growing up on the East Coast, there was no such thing as 1,000 yards shooting for me.
Right.
Certainly in hunting scenarios and then even shooting ranges, I didn't have access to that kind of distance.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think there's a lot of similarities in crossover, but they're all also almost polar opposites in the shooting, at least in the rifle shooting space, I guess, from the bench rest to the kind of the more long range side of things. A lot of differences where, you're shooting flat base bullets and, like you said, slow twists and light for caliber bullets rather than heavy for caliber bullets, and you trying to, at least as much as you can, control conditions where we just kind of accept conditions, generally speaking, and you just got to learn to deal with them or compensate for them,
Yeah, no, my eyes have been open since moving out west and really the long range and even I would say, back not all that long ago, 10, 15 years, it was every year at SHOT Show or wherever the launch was, oh, here comes the next Magnum. Yeah. Right? You had, RUMs, WSMs, WSSMs. I mean, there was always a new Magnum. And, it wasn't about efficiency. It was about Magnum. Like, how much powder can we get in the case? Yeah. And really, following that trend for quite some time. Here we are now looking at, fast twist barrels, really good bullets, and the technology to support it.
Well, and you'd like to think that we've kind of moved past that trend, but really not. I mean, you look at, and this is not to knock on any of these, but the 28 Nosler not too long ago, the 26 Nosler that's kind of come and gone since. Now you got the 22 Creedmoor kind of making some waves, and again, they're kind of these overbore cartridges that probably begin their life as a wildcat and kind of become a little bit standardized. I mean, maybe not the Noslers so much, but yeah, we're still kind of doing that to ourselves, even though we've kind of learned.
I think for some time it's it's like race cars. It's like, gosh, we just want to go faster.
It's human nature, right? It's like, how fast can I make this thing go, and how big and mean, and how hard can I make it hit? And it's, at some point you do just kind of accept that it becomes a kind of a sport in and of itself to see what we can push the boundaries.
I think it's anything that you measure, you want to do better, right? So
Sure.
You measure velocity, you want to go more.
Yeah.
And more is not always better.
Yeah. even though it sounds fun sometimes.
It
right?
does sound fun. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess to contrast that, kind of where things have gone, or where we've kind of learned, is that, there's no doubt that some of these really overbore cartridges come with their challenges. And, I think if you were to poll every person in Gunwerks, at least that's handled or familiar with some of the rifles or cartridges that we've chambered over the years, there's without a doubt a couple disfavored ones in the group, right? 300 rum would probably, just shooting from the hip, be my guess, would probably be right at the very top of the list there. And, there's probably some recoil element there where it's just not a lot of fun to shoot. But sometimes, and, I'm sure there are guys listening that have a 1/4 inch all day, 300 rum in their safe or whatever. But generally speaking, some of those really overbore cartridges are hard to tune. You look at the 28 and the 26 nozzle. The 28's a great round. I built one of the, right when it kind of came out. That was my first Gunwerks build. And it's an awesome round. Love it. Shoots great, but it can be a little bit more finicky to load for than, say, the 7 PRC. We'll kind of talk about some of the differences there, or the 7 LRM that, was the major, precursor to the 7 PRC. Look at the 26 nozzler that came after the 28, and that thing has already come and gone, because I think everybody realized that it was just, there were some that shot well, but it was just a little bit too much to handle, and it became very difficult to load and reliably.
Yeah, finicky
to
for
shoot
sure.
well.
Yeah, actually, first elk I ever shot.
And I would love to, if anybody's got any science behind why that actually is, but it seems like there's enough observed, reliable, repeatable instance of those very overbore cartridges just being hard to tune and shoot. I'd love to understand what the true mechanism is behind that. I don't have that answer here, but I think just observed recurrence of that, it's pretty well given at this point.
Yeah, and gosh, there's certainly smaller, efficient cartridges that shoot really well, and I think there's also a factor of recoil and gun management and those things.
Our ability to shoot it.
The ability to shoot it well. Yeah.
That's a big component, no doubt.
I can't help but feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we kind of transition from this, I'm calling it pie plate precision, right? It's the, hit a pie plate at 200 yards and we're ready to go kill an elk with grandpa, kind of mentality and just culture that we, I think we all probably grew up there, with, the current generations. It's probably, we've experienced that at one point or another in our life. But we've kind of moved on to this, okay, we're looking for, whatever it is, sub MOA, precision out of a rifle to be able to extend our range and be reliable and accurate enough to make those kills at whatever range we need to be able to stretch those shots out to.
I think that's a big piece, and then the tools.
Yeah.
Gosh, looking back, it's amazing you could hit anything at distance. Rangefinders, it was really hard to get a good range. Yeah. The technology's come so far, and then certainly all of the ballistic solutions and things that we have at our fingertips now, compared to back when. And realistically, those tools have really created, options and just capability is just so much better.
I mean, let's look at a couple of those different elements, right? So, I mean, you mentioned the technology. We've got the laser rangefinders. I mean, they've, 10, 20 years ago, they were just about non-existent. Maybe more in the 15 to 20, whatever, right? But like,
certainly not to this.
It used to be the kind of thing where if you saw a rangefinder on a guy, it's like, wow, like it's that. Versus now, it's like, well, you don't have a rangefinder. What's up?
Absolutely.
And, so that is honestly probably one of the most major changes to the entire shooting space.
Sure.
That's happened over the last, 30 whatever years. And then layer in on top of that the ability to calculate a ballistic solution in the field, right? Aaron was a pioneer in that. I mean, he was writing applications for Palm Pilots in college, to run ballistics. We launched that first BR rangefinder with the integrated ballistics, which was essentially the first consumer technology like that on the market, and dominated for a really long time. But having the ability to not only get a range, but to run a calculation on the fly rather than having to pull out drop charts or a ballistics app or whatever else. Now we've graduated from pulling those into in a rangefinder into a binocular. So it's one unit and you've got your entire ballistic solution with just a press of a button. Major improvement on the technology side of things. We haven't quite gotten to the level of being able to read wind. Wind's still a little bit of an art, but there's a couple products out there that have been kind of floating around recently that maybe eventually will have an ability to actually measure wind on the fly, but hasn't happened yet.
I think that's actually a great acknowledgement, and I'll touch on that a little bit when we talk about, or we'll jump in here and talk about bullets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The bullets that are available to us today, these long, sleek BC that's, just unheard of.
Sure.
Not that long ago.
Yeah.
And it's not just a high BC bullet, but they're really well made.
Yeah.
And where that comes into play is we're spinning the hell out of these things, right? We're 7-8 twist barrels.
Right.
And the RPMs are really up there, especially with some of these big bore cartridges. So any imperfections would be amplified with that kind of abuse, if you will.
Yeah.
So I think what that gets us, it's kind of the go faster mentality where we have, you get more drop, that we have all of the ability to calculate and compensate for the drop. But these high BC bullets get pushed less by the wind, and they're shedding less velocity at distance. And it's those wind drift calls are so much more critical now. Yeah. And so now, instead of, worrying about aim on fur, for drop, now we're worried about, hey, how much wind drift can I get away with? Because realistically, out west here, it's, some would call windy.
We are in Wyoming.
Yeah.
That is the rumor.
Yes.
Wyoming has a decent amount of supply of wind.
Yeah. So when you think about, it's really hard. We can plug in a table and understand how much my wind drift is. I get a ballistic solution, but I'm still having to hold for it. It's still less. Gravity is really, defined.
Yeah.
This wind across a distance, especially you think about 1,000 yards, and going back to Sheep Mountain, you think about just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It hasn't even been that long, maybe, where the wind is doing something entirely different.
Yeah.
Out across
downrange,
this across the draw up, and you can't calculate for that. There are no wind flags.
I've made this analogy. You're right. We've gotten drop solutions to the point really where it's almost a commodity, right? It's almost a given. It's just science. With any of the readily available technology anymore, you click, you tap a button, and you have a solution, and and it's almost infallible, right? I mean, we all know that it's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's a calculation.
Darn good.
If you've got good velocity and good BC and a good ballistic calculator, you know what your bullet drop's going to be within a margin of error. Wind, on the other hand, there's some science and there's also some art to wind. At least as technology stands right now, I can't just, point my device downrange and it's going to say, well, you've got this wind every 100-yard interval out to your target and hold this much based on it. We'll probably get there eventually, but we're not there right now with any kind of consumer grade technology. And so it comes down to being able to measure wind with maybe a wind meter is probably the most empirical tool that we've got right there at your shooting position, right? And from there on out, it's observing terrain and understanding how wind flows and moves across terrain. And if it's, doing this here, it's probably doing about that there. And then you're maybe observing some vegetation or, dust or, whatever else that is. Being aware of prevalent winds versus some of your thermals and other things that change, but it becomes kind of an art mixed with a little bit of science, right?
Yeah, I would say really less science. I would say
more
over, on drop, we've got science and math, that we can count on.
And really, it's not even that. It's just push a button and tell me what to do.
Yeah, and then over here, you've got art and experience, maybe.
But you touched on it, right? The evolution of bullet design, I think, is again like, okay, we talked about technology. Now we talk about kind of the mechanics of it, and I think our bullet design and where things have gone in the last few years is one of the other major developments in long range. Where it used to be, slower twists, lighter bullets, I guess boat tail bullets have been around for quite a while.
Sure,
traditionally even more flat base.
Right, but not and they typically weren't super heavyweight. Yeah. They might have been a little bit heavier, but nothing like where we are today.
But we're gaining massive amounts of BC, or essentially more efficient bullets, slipperier bullets that are traveling better, less wind resistance, and maintaining more velocity and energy downrange. And what that translates into is we can achieve long-range performance with a bullet that's starting out slower with less powder behind it and the other baggage that's associated with those overboard cartridges we talked about. We can achieve those desirable long-range results with a more reasonable package, I think, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm. And barrels.
Right?
You think about a fast 7 or 8 twist barrel and what that's doing to a bullet. It has to be a high quality product to not scar the jacket or deform it so that we have issues.
That's one thing that we've learned in recent years is the bore and the condition of the bore affects BC. It affects a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
That normally you would not necessarily associate those intuitively together.
Yeah, it wasn't not uncommon for me to spin bullets apart.
Yeah,
like just come apart.
But that small bore, high velocity stuff. Yeah. Case design is an interesting topic because in some ways, we're always coming out with the new, latest, greatest, sexiest Magnum this, Magnum that, whatever. But at the end of the day, a case design really just needs to hold some powder, and the bullet is really far more important as far as what we're achieving with a round. But there is quite a bit in case design, right? And I think we've seen some more modern case designs.
Yes.
That I think, some of these shorter powder columns, some of these more efficient designs and shapes of cartridges, and the powder capacity where we've right-sized maybe some of the powder capacities that we're using in some of these newer cartridges.
Sure. Taper, shoulder angle, neck length.
Sure.
if you look at new cartridges compared to, older cartridges, you can just look at them and tell which one is newer and better. The evolution of these things and what we've learned.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to that coin. I mean, trying to think a couple examples here. You look at like in the 6mm, you've got the 243, been around for forever, right?
Yes.
The guy's favorite round, and it's a great round, but it was designed for a slower twist, generally speaking. Now you've got, this. We'll talk about the 6.5 Creedmoor, but you've got the 6 Creedmoor to compare 6mm, just as an example. Ballistically, they're essentially identical, right? But what you've got is the 6 Creedmoor is designed for a little bit faster twist, a little bit bigger bullets. And so, a lot of guys will say, well, I can do the same thing with my 243 or my 243 AI. Yeah, if you build a custom and you get the right twist barrel. And yes, I mean, essentially there's
case capacity.
Essentially no advantage to one or the other at that point. But as they were configured originally and how they're chambered from the factory, there are some significant differences, but it's actually more in the bullet than in the actual case design itself. Now you could say maybe the Creedmoor case is a little bit more efficient, a little bit more inherently accurate, maybe, right? But at the end of the day, it really actually comes back to the bullet more than
we talk about the 22 Creedmoor, one of the newest,
right?
One of the newest cartridges available, and the 22 250 and the 22 Creedmoor are right on top of each other. Case capacity, the Creedmoor has just a little more, but the 22 250 is absolutely accurate, right? The potential tuning has been a favored varmint round for a long time and capable of precision. But there's your difference. Everything that was built for the 22 250, every gun you get, all the ammo, you could get yourself a 50 grain or a 55 grain.
Yeah, and that's about the max, right?
Right, but it's the same case capacity as the 22 Creedmoor.
Now we're at 90 grain.
Yeah, and the standard offering is 80.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But if you take a 22 250, like you're saying, and you try and hand load it, the throat's a lot shorter, and I'm limited
twist rates.
The twist rate, where you won't stabilize a bullet, right? 12 twists compared to 8.
Yeah,
big difference.
Absolutely.
And so that we had somebody in not that long ago, and they're like, why would I get a 22 Creedmoor if I already have a 22 250?
Yeah,
and I mean that the answer is in the ballistics and the capability. Your 22 250 cannot get that long range performance out of the 50 grain bullets.
Yeah, to make maybe an even more like big game hunting, it's kind of our bread and butter. Relevant would be like the 30 cals. So you look at the 300 Win Mag. It's like the Lord's cartridge, I think I've heard it referred to as, versus the newer 300 PRC. So that's actually a really interesting comparison. Okay, so 300 Win Mag. What would you say? Most guys are shooting
180s. Sure.
You probably see some 165s.
A
lot of guys have been hand loading it for it. Well, the Union, you put a 200, 220 grain in there, you're going to give up some velocity, but we'll get to that. That's actually a good place to take it if you have the twist rate to support.
Right.
Now look at the 300 PRC that came out here in the last few years. 300 PRC is designed specifically around a 225 grain bullet. That's exactly the bullet that it was designed around. It's almost the reverse. You design the cartridge and then fit a bullet, whatever bullet goes in there, versus here's a bullet, let's make a cartridge for it.
And case capacity
almost
very similar, right? I mean,
so like we ran some numbers here. Let me pull them up. So I'm not trying to pull them out of my head, but this is a really very telling example, right? Because I think that's a very apples to apples comparison.
Sure.
Now you can argue, okay, well, the 300 PRC is an unbelted cartridge. There's maybe a little advantage there. pretty minor, right? It's just kind of one of those things with making a new cartridge. But again, the bullet here is what really matters. So you look at a 300 Win. To me, like the 180 AccuBond is like the quintessential.
Sure. Great reference.
300 Win elk killing cartridge. You see a lot of that out there. Okay, so you're averaging maybe 2950, just a little south of 3,000 foot per second. Pretty good velocities out of a Magnum cartridge. That bullet BC, all I could find was a G1 because it's a more traditional hunting bullet. So at 800 yards, this is I think 5,000 foot elevation, pretty average. You're about 18 minutes.
Average for us.
Yeah, average for us, right?
Yes.
Well, average for long range hunting, I would say.
Sure.
That's kind of our standard go to like for a turret elevation if you built or whatever. So you're about 18 minutes to drop. 8 minutes to drop, 8.5 minutes to drop at 500. You're 18 minutes to drop at 800. You're 25.8 minutes to drop at 1,000 yards. Okay, versus a 300 PRC with a 225 ELDM. You're doing 28.10 out of the barrel. So you're
barely getting out of the
50. You're almost 150 feet per second slower.
Right. So slow.
So that's a significant difference in muzzle velocity, right? Obviously a much larger bullet. Okay, so that's a .391 G7, a much, much better BC if you translated those across. So at 500 yards, you're actually doing worse.
Yeah.
Only by 0.2 minutes.
Let's call it the same.
That's a quarter inch more drop at 500 yards. Okay, well, we'll give that to the 300 Win. Well, now let's start going out farther. You're 17 minutes to drop at 800, and 23.8 minutes to drop at 1,000.
Yep, so 2 minutes less.
2 minutes less at 1,000. Okay, so that's 20 inches more drop at 1,000 yards. Realistically, with a modern rifle, it's just a couple more clicks.
Yeah.
Really not that big a deal because like we said, this is it's just a point and click.
Yep. It's not instrumental.
It's a solution. It just gives me the number and I doubt it.
Right. Tail of the tape.
Okay.
Wind drift.
Now here's where it gets interesting. Okay. So I just plugged in just a really easy round numbers, 10 mile per hour, left to right wind, full value, 90 degrees. So there's a little bit of spin drift built into this, but it's same twist rate on both, so it doesn't really, that washes out. But you are 6.1 minutes of wind drift with a 10 mile per hour in the 300 Win, and you're 3.8 minutes of wind drift in the 300 PRC. So that's what, a minute and a half, almost. Is that what that works out to be? Not quite.
More.
Yeah. No, that's almost half, right? Yeah. So significant difference.
2.3 minutes.
Yeah. So that's what, 25 inches more wind drift.
A couple feet.
Right?
Yeah.
At 1,000 yards with the 300 Win versus the 300 PRC.
Pretty substantial.
So I mean that's a miss. Right. We won't take the calculations quite that far down the road, but if you really want to get interesting with it,
well, look at
you figure out your margin of error and you learn.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to calculate my wind call down to the maybe 2 miles per hour versus maybe a 5 mile per hour error with the other to be able to make a clean kill.
Well, and I'm going to add on there. I think really important here. So 2.3 minutes at 1,000 yards, different wind drift, but the velocity started out way slower, and now it's 1924. So it's just under 2,000 at 1,000 yards. Where that Win Mag with the 180, 1,600, and the energy. I know you don't like to talk energy, but energy. 1,850 foot-pounds of energy with the PRC and the heavy bullet compared to 1,000, almost
just
2x.
1,000 with the Win. Yeah, almost 2x the energy. Now, again,
that's a big difference.
It is.
From the same powder charge.
Now, if you've listened to us, we don't pay a lot of attention here at Gunwerks to energy because, my analogy is, okay, do you want a bowling ball or a broadhead, which is going to kill better?
Yeah.
Energy does not actually translate to effectiveness at killing things. What really matters is a reliable expansion on a bullet beyond like bullet placement, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to have a well expanded bullet to create the trauma, to create the blood loss that we need to kill an animal. And so here's what's interesting is with that Accumon, and this is a bonded bullet, right? This is a tough bullet to expand at 1,000 yards. It's only doing 1,600. I didn't look up Nosler's recommendations, but most bullets, it seems like you're about 1,800 foot per second minimum to get reliable expansion, where you're at 1924 with the ELDM, which is a much softer match style bullet, which is going to expand very, very well at that velocity. So you're getting far more reliable expansion with a much larger bullet, also carrying more energy if you care.
Yeah.
Meaning you're killing stuff way, way, way better with that PRC at that range.
Yeah. So, I mean, whether you do energy or velocity, I think it's really telling that it started out slower, shed less velocity across that path, and ballistically you're delivering it on target. And then you have bullet performance that you're able to drive. So effectiveness, way different.
Yeah. Now, just to circle back, I will say you could load that exact same 225 ELDM in a 300 Win Mag and achieve essentially the same results if you had the twist to support it.
Yeah.
And so, again, the people get so fixated on these cartridge wars. It's, this cartridge is better than that cartridge, and that cartridge is better than this cartridge. I think we would do ourselves a service to focus more on bullet choice than on cartridge choice, at least on a broad scale.
Yeah.
In a broad sense, right?
Yeah, and realistically, all the things that we talked about, the better bullets, better barrels, the faster twist, you can't take your 20-year-old Win Mag and achieve the results that you're trying to with the PRC.
Yeah.
You can't just load them up. It probably has a 12 twist. So.
Yeah, depending on the model.
Yeah.
Some of the newer factory models are starting to increase their twist rates to follow that trend. Now, here's another interesting one is a 300 rum. Okay, I mean, this is we talk about massive overbore, big cartridges. Okay, so 300 rum with a 180 Accumon, the same bullet as a 300 Win, is starting out at 3250. So you're
cranking.
Yeah, 350 foot per second. 300 foot per second faster. So it is outrunning the 300 PRC for quite a ways out there because it's starting 400 feet per second faster than the PRC or the 300 PRC.
A lot more horsepower.
So you're at 6.7 minutes at 500. You're at 14 minutes at 800 versus 17 with the 300 PRC. You're at 20 at 1,000 versus 23, 24 at 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's look at wind.
Well, and wind and then velocity.
Okay, so wind, again, this is your 300 rum doing 3250. At 1,000 yards, a 10 mile per hour wind, you're 5.3 minutes of wind with the 300 rum, and you're only 3.8 with the 300 PRC.
Unbelievable.
So the 300
way
PRC
better
is still way, way better in the wind. Way better.
Yeah.
And energy, again, if you care, is 500 foot-pounds of energy more with the 300 PRC at that range. And your velocity, your retained velocity on impact at 1,000 yards is over 100 foot per second faster with the 300 PRC than the 300 rum that started going so much faster.
Yeah.
Right? So again, that the perfect example where less powder, less recoil, more reliable, efficient, tuned cartridge is actually outperforming the big cannon of a super Magnum.
Right.
When you actually crunch the numbers downrange.
Yeah. It's
a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
And gosh, I don't know that I could stomach the punishing that the 300 rum would deliver if it was better.
Yeah.
But yeah, efficiency, and we only took this out to 1,000 yards.
Oh, it's just gonna
It
keep
gets
getting
better
beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I called it, we got our outline here, ye old knockdown power, right? I mean, that's what, Dad and Grandpa always talked about is, they like their 30-06 because it just had that knockdown power. And, there's nothing wrong with 30-06. Kill a lot of, killing critters way longer than I have, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Well,
you talk about case design.
First gun, right? That's, 30-06. But, yeah. I say that, and I told you, like, I'm probably the last guy to be saying this because I'm the one building the 28 nozzlers, and well, could I neck down a 6.5 PRC to a 6 PRC and get it going 3,500 per second? I mean, we've been joking about that, and it's always fun to play. And I think at the end of the day, they're all killing stuff, and they're all doing it really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is something to be said about what I want a big fast. I want to drive a race car, even if I'm driving it down Main Street to work. I'm going to drive a race car because it's what I want, and it makes me happy, and I feel confident shooting it. I mean, there is value in that, and that's not to say that anybody's wrong going with a bigger cartridge or hot rod this or that. I think it's just important that we recognize that there are that we accept those. Understand maybe and accept those drawbacks and those pitfalls with some of those choices, right? So if you drive a race car, it's probably not going to handle really well on gravel roads and potholes and whatever else. And so it kind of comes with the territory.
Absolutely. And really comes down to, we talk about bullet selection, we talk about these long range performance, but lighter, faster bullets have a place, right? If I wanted to varmint hunt, like we have the 22-250, which has long been, probably the undisputed varmint round for who knows how many years, a long time. And comparing that to the 22 Creedmoor, they are way different.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Same in cartridge size, capacity within, marginal, but if I'm going to be shooting, prairie dogs or woodchucks or rock chucks, and at the distances where I might do that, that lighter, faster bullet is not going to exit.
Yeah.
Right. It's not going to ricochet.
Sure.
It's going to deliver energy or expansion.
If you notice there is a little bit of an edge at the shorter or more medium ranges with those lighter, faster bullets, right? It's really the bigger, heavier bullets are outrunning there's some point where they cross paths and one starts outperforming.
Absolutely.
Right. And generally with a bigger Magnum, big game hunting rounds, I usually expect that to be somewhere in that 600, 800 range, depending on the two bullets you're comparing. But that's a little bit different story with the smaller rounds. Yeah, and
that was always a big factor for me growing up, where there weren't long distances. Long distance was 400 or 500 yards.
Yeah,
shooting woodchucks and having to account for every bullet. You want that bullet not to pass through, not to ricochet, and even if you miss those light, fast bullets, and they're so they blow up
at downrange,
right?
Yeah.
Those long, sleek bullets, are more prone to skipping.
Yeah. Well, if you got fur hunters, guys that are coyote hunting that don't want to be making a big mess out of furs,
right?
Smaller bullets are the go-to there. So there's certainly different applications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reasons for running.
Yeah.
Different types of bullets for sure.
Yeah, but it's hard to argue the same ballistics. From the 30 cals to the 22, it's the same thing, right? We're starting out faster and we're catching up over distance, and by the time you get out to long range, it's outperforming without question, right? 22 Creed is, capable, but if you take the 22 Creed and you have a really fast twist, and then you try and load them with 50s, you're going to blow some bullets up.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, is my guess. I've not blown any up on fast twist 22s, but it's just, you're definitely spinning them. Yeah. We could do the RPM calculator.
Right. So I had just some notes here, and I'd be curious what your take is on it. But I called it the anatomy of the perfect load, and I think there's kind of an order of operations there on, okay, I have some application, or I have some end result that I want to achieve. Now, how do I choose that, right? And again, I think the go-to approach, just naturally for most of us, is, well, I want a 300 Win mag, or I want a 22-250, or I want a, whatever else that is. But I think the correct approach is actually to choose your bullet first. And I'm kind of sound like a broken record here, but I think if you say, okay, relevant example, I do an antelope tag this year, right? So, okay, I need to go kill an antelope. The antelope's it's a large game, but it's relatively small scale on that end. I would generally say that somewhere from 100 to 150 grain bullet is probably the sweet spot for antelope. You really don't need anything bigger. And you could do it smaller, but you start losing a little bit of margin for error if you make a marginal shot on a game. Maybe you guys would have different opinions there, but that's kind of my broad. I would maybe narrow that down to more like a 115 to 140 grain bullet or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think anything over 100.
Yeah. So, that really narrows me down to either a 6mm or 6.5, or if you want to get fancy, something in the 25s. We don't do any 25s here at Gunwerks, but somewhere there, right? 6 is going to be maybe on the light side, but very, very doable.
Yeah.
6.5 is going to be plenty. Maybe overkill, but not. There's no such thing as overkill in some parlance.
Yeah. But the bigger challenge is distance.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, we're wide open.
Right.
Antelope are in just big country, especially wide open prairie. Yeah. You're going to have to.
So you want to be able to stretch it out, right?
Yeah.
And so, but see how that's starting to narrow me down. Okay, so I know I need to build or take on this hunt either a 6mm or a 6.5. So that narrows it down a little bit. Now you've got like a 243. We talked about. You got like a 6mm Creedmoor. Thinking about just widely available cartridges. I could do a 6.5 PRC, could do a 6.5 Creedmoor. Couple options there. So where does that make sense? Creedmoor is, in my opinion, a little bit anemic for really long stuff, or 6.5 Creedmoor at least. I'd like to see maybe just a little bit more velocity if you're shooting way out there.
Yeah. Distance matters.
Or, maybe
thinking 1,000?
Or maybe, 1,000 is a long ways on an antelope, especially a small target like that. But, even backing it off to 700.
Yeah.
With the wind, whatever else. And then also you're thinking, okay, well, maybe I want to use this gun for other things like mule deer and elk. And so a PRC may be just a little bit more, little bit better choice there in taking it into some larger animals.
More's always better.
Honestly, probably the Creedmoor at medium ranges would be the better choice, right? But if you want to stretch it out or bring it.
This is our argument, right? This is how we've gotten.
I'm turning into that guy that I'm telling.
This is how we got to the whole Magnum craze that we have endured for so long.
Exactly right.
Right? It's well, if I had a little more, but man,
it comes at a cost.
You'd be hard pressed to say that the 6.5 Creedmoor isn't ideal
choice
for antelope.
I'd actually argue that the 6 Creedmoor might even be better. It's lower recoil, right? It's if it was a dedicated antelope round, you really don't need a much bigger bullet than that.
Yeah.
So there's some
sure.
This is an open-ended question because it's TBD right now.
Yeah.
I've even looked at some 25s because I honestly, a 25 cal right there in between, and maybe a sweet spot for antelope.
Yeah.
But we don't do them at Gunwerks.
It's a quarter bore.
Yeah, right. Little quarter bore.
It's sort of been left out of the equation, except for some small circles at this point.
It's so close, right? I mean,
yeah, it's hard to find this
6'5" there's a small enough jump there.
It's gonna be left right now in the near term to people that want to tinker.
Yeah, for sure.
Yourself included.
Yeah, always tinkering.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think the bullet choice is first, and it's not only that, but it's the flavor of bullet. All right. So we touched on this a little bit, but you've got your AccuBonds, you've got your match bullets, you've got your hollow point boat tail bullets versus your ballistic tip bullets, and all of them behave a little bit differently depending on what you're doing. If I'm, hunting whitetails in really thick cover, I want to make sure that I have a good exit wound on a round, and so you better not be shooting a burger or a really explosive bullet. On the other hand, if I'm shooting antelope in wide open Wyoming, there's not a lot of places that they can go to disappear, right? And so I'm not as concerned about getting good blood trail with an exit wound to be able to follow that animal. I just need to make an effective kill.
Yes.
So I think that's an important part of that choice. If you need to have something big and heavy that you need to bullet to hold together well, or you're expecting potentially close-up shots, you're trying to break an elk shoulder in thick timber, still hunting elk, that's where the AccuBond may actually be a far better choice.
Yeah.
And you don't need the long-range performance of a super high BC bullet. You just need something that's gonna make a big hole and do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think you're determining your effective distance. So you brought that up, right? It's okay. Am I shooting them tight quarters in the timber? Am I stretching out to 1,000 yards in sagebrush flats in Wyoming or somewhere in between? If you're telling yourself, I hear this from guys a lot. Oh, I need a 300 rounder. I need something big to knock these things down. But I really don't I've been watching you guys. That's cool, but I don't really see myself shooting past like 600 yards. Just that's kind of where my personal limit is.
Ability
I don't really
to
see myself shooting much past that. Great, but you know what? You probably don't need a 28 nozzler. Maybe you need a 7 SAUM instead. Because there's essentially no advantage to shooting a 28 nozzler over a 7 SAUM at those ranges, right? Same thing with the 6.5 PRC and the Creedmoor. If you're saying, I don't really see myself shooting past 600, 700 yards, I as well just shoot the Creedmoor because it's cheaper to shoot. It's a great efficient round. It's inherent.
Oh, and you can practice.
Hammer. Practice. You get lots of trigger time. Longer barrel,
so enjoyable to
There's
shoot.
Just so many advantages to that if you don't need that extended ballistic performance
right
out of that bullet. So
that said, I've shot next to you, me shooting a Creedmoor and you shooting a
like I said,
PRC.
I'm the guy
Noticeable.
preaching to myself here because I'm the worst at this, right?
Noticeable difference in on steel.
Recoil.
There's
advantages there. There's a few things.
Yeah,
but
the 6.5 PRC is a tremendous cartridge.
Both great rounds, and that is generally my go-to.
Yeah. And I think as you, so we talked about antelope, but if you now take in mule deer into the equation, for me, I'm gonna up it to the PRC every time.
I would agree.
Right?
Yeah.
They're bigger.
Yeah.
Right? Bone mass, sturdier animals. I'm gonna move up.
Yeah.
Right? At that point, so if I've got mule deer and antelope, I want to edge my bets.
I agree.
Hedge my bets.
Now, there's one other element that I added in here, and this is a little bit kind of farther down the line, but it's also consider the package that you need to carry. So there's a couple elements there. There's the weight and the mass, right? So you don't want to be shooting a 300 rum in a 7-pound rifle. I promise you, you just don't want to. Right? There's also a barrel length thing, and so if you're the kind of guy that really likes the idea of an 18-inch barrel to keep it either so you're having a suppressor on the end. It's not overly long, or you're doing a lot of bushwhacking. You get it in and out of a scabbard really quick, or whatever else. That is going to impact your muzzle velocity significantly based on your bullet and your cartridge choice.
Absolutely.
It's already made, right?
Right.
So now you're actually kind of flipping the traditional thought process on its head. And I think you're actually looking at it almost exactly backwards from what most people tend to want to look at it. And so, the barrel length to me, or the weight of the rifle, is kind of the last part of that equation. And if you need to go light, then you want to consider a lighter recoiling cartridge. If you're going to go short, you may need to consider what is the impact on my velocity. An 18-inch 28 nozzler is probably not a very economical thing. But then again, if you need to maintain the velocity and have a short barrel, there's options. Right now, I'd probably recommend something like a 7 SAUM in a shorter barrel because it's more efficient, and it's that pairing is just going to be a far better pairing.
That's a big difference. 6-inch from an 18-inch to a 24-inch, big difference.
Big difference,
depending on the cartridge.
Usually about 30 to 50 foot per second per inch.
Yeah,
is what we've observed.
So an 18-inch 6.5 PRC, a 6.5 Creedmoor 24-inch might outperform it. Velocity.
Very well mined. Well mined.
It's going to be. I have to look at that.
And you need to look back again, kind of circle back to a couple of those earlier decisions, which is, what's my max effective range? What bullet am I shooting? And am I going to be effective at those ranges?
Yeah.
So a couple things.
But compact package, short barrels. 20-inch barrels pretty common. Pretty common for a Western.
I think we've kind of, you're seeing trends towards shorter barrels, and not to say that we necessarily started that trend, but we have definitely been doing
20 inches probably
for a long time. We've been moving that direction for sure. Yeah. When guys were building 28, 26-inch barrels, we were doing 22 and 24s. And now we're doing 18s and 20s and a few and 22s.
Yeah.
It's kind of been the focus.
Yeah. And I think the popularity of suppressors for hunting has only grown.
And I think that's driving a lot of it.
And you throw a 24-inch barrel and another 6, 8, 9-inch length can.
Yeah. It's pretty unwieldy.
It's quite difficult to deal with. Not so bad on prairie dogs, antelope.
Yeah.
And out on the prairie, it's not nearly as bad.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of just my approach is, and again, it's almost a lecture for myself because I think we're all guilty of it. Myself especially is, wanting that bigger, faster hot rod round. I think I've overheard Aaron kind of name his sweet spot for a velocity on a big game cartridge, and I believe it was in that 29 to 2950 range. And if you look at the 7LRM, which he designed years and years ago, way ahead of its time, look at where the 7 PRC ended up now. It's their ballistic twins, right? It was designed around 180 grain high BC bullet, which was very, very heavy for a 7mm at the time, at about 2950 or so. And so that really becomes a sweet spot. And you look at the performance of a 28 nozzler versus a 7 PRC. There's a reason I built a 7 PRC last year. My 28 tends to sit in the safe. Is that 7 PRC is a beautifully designed cartridge. It's efficient. It's right in that sweet spot velocity wise. Shoots and tunes really well, and ballistically, it's capable to 1,200 yards on big game.
Yeah, and I think that, if you take into account the bullet weight and the velocity and the burn rate and how easy something is to tune, in the middle of a node, you have some consistency and certainly I've seen cartridges that tune really easy and shoot well at those velocities. It's probably not an anomaly that back in the day the most precise cartridge, the 30 BR that I was shooting that 2950, 2970 range
with those
with a 118.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's some science there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, we weren't weighing charges. We straight dump right from a powder dump into the case, and man, they would shoot.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Not even weighing. And here we are, trying to count powder down to the grain.
Yeah. Yeah, it was short range.
Yeah. I guess that's probably
it was short range.
Yeah. How were your velocity spreads pretty consistent, or
there's
attention to?
Yeah, we didn't monitor it that closely.
Doesn't care as long as it shot a good group, then it could. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean back then I didn't set up a chrono and shoot large strings, and we just shot.
Yeah, little bit of a different world.
Yeah,
but I mean the results.
But yeah, so I think really in that mentality or thought is, I think it runs true across different calibers. So I think it's a factor of pressure, right? I think if you overpressure, I think you have other issues. I think if you're under pressure, you don't quite achieve efficiency. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but when I think these cartridges and bullets, and as they're matched up well, just the performance that we're getting is so much better.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, things have come a long way in the last few years, and I think, just kind of as a, I don't know, parting statement or whatever, I think that would be the encouragement is, I mean, there's a lot of guns out there that do the job well, and there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, but if you're considering, okay, what is the next build, or how can I improve and take that next step into a better, more long-range effective hunting rifle, is consider coming down a little bit on case size or powder capacity. Consider moving up a bit on your bullet weight for caliber. Mm-hmm. And some of these more modern cartridges are doing exactly that, and I think the results are there. Yeah. I think all of us, it's going to make all of us better shooters and better hunters in the long run, move in that direction.
Oh, and it's so much more enjoyable. It's just like guns are so much more enjoyable when you hit and you're able to connect at distance and deliver on target consistently and stretch the limits of what you thought you were capable of. And with all of the tools and equipment and solutions that we have provided, it's amazing how obtainable it is.
Yeah.
To shoot 1,000 yards, right?
Absolutely. It's just the right setup and a little bit of
unbelievable
math.
Yeah.
And more trigger time is going to translate to a more shootable rifle is going to translate to more trigger time, because it's going to be more enjoyable to shoot. Yeah. Right. And more trigger time is going to translate to better shooting.
Man. Yeah, there's no way you could talk me into practicing with a 300 rum for a oof.
Pretty rough.
Yeah, 8-pound rifle. Yeah, I'll leave that one for you.
Well, thanks for joining, Jen. That was a fun conversation. Guys, definitely send out topics or ideas. Hit us up if you want to hear anything discussed or have questions that you want touched on, and we'll be sure to hit those on future episodes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Until next time.
Yep.
If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram, or send us an email to podcast@gunwerks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunwerks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.